Hello and welcome. My name is Aiden, and today I want to take you through a little project that I've been working on. But first, I want to talk about the problem that it aims to solve. Now, this is Obsidian. This is a familiar site for many of you out there, I imagine, who have used Obsidian or similar knowledge-based management systems such as Notion or Slab. The idea is this. Usually over here on the left, you have various different folders. In these folders, you can add notes, and then in those notes, you can add text, and then the knowledge management system is built around that text and allows you to perform various processes on it. That's all great. We don't necessarily have a problem with that. However, there are some problems with these traditional knowledge management systems, and Obsidian is one of them. So, for example, let's say that I want to add a new note. Let's just call it OCaml. So, OCaml is a programming language. And if I go over here to this Wikipedia page, it has a bunch of information on it. And what Obsidian is really, really good at, it's good at a lot of different things. One of the things that it's really, really good at is that I can take all this text, all of this very useful information, and I can copy it from Wikipedia or wherever it may be. I can paste it in here, and now I have a perfectly good note with all of this stuff parsed, and it looks nice, it works well, and over here in the sidebar, in the search, I can search up something like OCaml, and now that fancy indexing and text processing will pop up, and I can look at every instance of the word OCaml, or maybe I want to look up programming, so I can look up every instance of the word programming, or I can look up objective, whatever it may be. I can look up and search through my notes. However, if I wanted to do something like programming concepts, well, that doesn't exist here in OCaml, in this note. That word simply does not exist. If I look up programming concepts, it's not here. So Obsidian search doesn't have any idea what I'm talking about. However, as a user, to me it seems like OCaml, being a programming language, should pop up in this case. Let's do another one. JavaScript, another programming language. Very similar, well, I wouldn't say similar, but in a similar sphere to OCaml. Let's see, I think we can grab this from over here in the MDN web docs. I'm just going to copy a bit of this. So now I have a new note called JavaScript, and it contains all of this information. Super, super useful. If I go and I search programming, well, now both JavaScript and OCaml pop up, and they have various results from within them. And if I hover over these, it'll take me through all of the different instances. Super nice. Still, though, if I look up programming concepts, it doesn't pop up at all. Or what should I use to build a web app? That search doesn't complete. Now, with that said, there are some really, really cool features of Obsidian, and I don't want to seem like I'm knocking Obsidian. I'm using it for a reason. Obsidian is an excellent app. One of the things that really drew me to it in the first place was that I could do this cool backlink thing where I could just connect notes like this. And if I would link to a note, and I would say like another programming language is, if I spell it right, JavaScript. Well, now if I go over to this graph view, and I have some other notes in here as well. If I go over to this graph view, you can see that JavaScript and OCaml are actually connected. However, if I remove that, well, they're no longer connected. OCaml and JavaScript may be similar in our minds, but as far as Obsidian or traditional knowledge management systems understand things, they aren't related at all. They don't have any overlap. Now, let's look at another problem that has appeared for me as I've used knowledge bases, and specifically as I've used Obsidian. Because what I've done in my personal folder, and this isn't that, is I've created a large variety of different folders and directories and projects and sections where I sort my notes to. So every time that I add a new note, I go in and I figure out where I'm going to put it. However, one situation that has arisen again and again for me is I'll have something like this. I'll have two different folders, and one of them will be something like programming in education. So this implies that I'm learning something about programming. And then one will be a project-specific implementation where I'm learning something. So education, programming, work, things that are important to learn. Where should JavaScript go? As a web developer, this absolutely applies. So does this, though, because I should always be learning. Same thing with OCaml. Maybe that's going to be useful for me in my work. Maybe it will be something that I learn for educational programming. The problem is not just that I'm bad at organizing things, which I absolutely am. And as far as many of you might be concerned, this is just a matter of organization in a better way. My folder layout doesn't necessarily make sense. Or I'm not using a system like Zettelkasten, which would solve my problem because I wouldn't have any folders. I'd have a completely flat structure. However, Obsidian does enable folders, and the whole idea of Obsidian is to be able to take a big directory of Markdown and to turn it into a functional knowledge base application. So for me, this situation arises all the time. JavaScript doesn't belong in just one of these. It belongs in both. However, I can't put it in both because this strict hierarchical directory structure of organization, which can absolutely be very, very intuitive for many people, is limiting in its flexibility in representing the mind. So let me show you something. This is Qwest. It's a knowledge base application that I've been working on with a partner of mine, and it does things a little bit differently. Let's start with the same thing that we just did over at Obsidian. Create a new note. We'll call it JavaScript. Now, JavaScript will just come in here and we'll copy all of the content from in here and we'll paste it in. As you can see, it formats it the same way. It's not as pretty, early stages. However, we're working towards that. And if I go over to the sidebar here, I can actually press this little button right here, which we'll come back to later. Now that that's connected, I'm going to add another note. I'm going to call this one OCaml. I'm going to come and grab all of the stuff that I grabbed earlier from OCaml, and I'm just going to paste it in here. Now I'm going to do that refresh button again, and now over here on the left, we have JavaScript popping up. That's interesting because we didn't add any particular connection. We didn't go up here and add a hyperlink to JavaScript, but the difference is that Qwest understands the meaning of your notes. So when I type in content here and Qwest processes it, it understands that JavaScript is actually very similar to OCaml. They're both programming languages, so they should be displayed in a similar way. If I go over to JavaScript, then it will actually tell me that JavaScript and OCaml are similar because this works in both directions. The system knows that things are similar, so I can click between them. And there's no requirement that you manually handle connections. You can. There's a functionality for that. However, what this allows you to do is essentially create a system where your entire knowledge base is connected and the system understands the underlying ideas. Let's go to one of these hyperlinks. We can take the Scala programming language and let's create a new idea, call it Scala, and here we go. Hit this refresh because this may be out of date. Now you can see that both of these are actually connected. It understands that both of these are relatively similar. Now if I take OCaml and I drag it up here, it'll create the connection explicitly. Now if I go over to OCaml or Scala, it'll say I have connected these things. Let's check out the graph view. As you can see, all of the notes that we had are explicitly connected. We have a brighter line, if we zoom in, between OCaml and Scala, because we manually created a connection there. However, JavaScript is still understood by the system to be connected to both OCaml and Scala. Whenever you open up your graph view in Qwest, it will show you all of the connections between all of your ideas. There's one more thing. One of the really useful things about understanding the underlying meaning of notes is that you can build systems on top of it. So, what we've built here is an interface for asking your ideas anything. I want to know what are the programming languages mentioned in my notes. Now, if I take this and I bring it over to Obsidian and I plug it in, 0 matches. However, if I enter this here, it's going to search my ideas, and then it is going to look through each of the results, programming languages, every one of those came up. Even though this particular query does not match text in any of these files, it still understood that they are related. And then an overview was created where specific excerpts are mentioned and referenced in order to create a direct answer to your question. You can ask your ideas anything. So that's the idea behind Qwest. It's there to solve a problem. If I go over to settings and I import some ideas and I initiate that import, it's going to upload my files, finalize the import, and now we've successfully added these to my knowledge base. Let's go back to the graph view. Let's see what it thinks is connected. As you can see, all of these ideas have interconnected concepts and are related in certain ways. With that said, I'm going to leave you with this view here because it encapsulates what Qwest is all about. It understands the meaning and the connections between all of your ideas, and it can build features on top of that. If you're interested in trying this out for yourself, check out the description below and we'll have a link to a waitlist. This is currently in the alpha and early beta stage, so we are not necessarily in full-on production. Things might work a little bit strangely, but we're looking for testers because we'd love to start getting feedback on this early on. So check out those links below. If you have thoughts or feedback, or you think this is a terrible idea, or you think it's a good idea, leave a comment, give us your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. We're looking for any feedback that we can get on this. So with that said, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.